Hello, welcome back to the second part of the pixel theory. No, this is the actual theory with the thing that I have discovered and try to share with every one of you. And after the third part will be just a conclusion and some little details more. But yeah, so let's continue with the second part. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep my picture there, but I think for this one there are so many images that sometimes I just have to remove myself, or maybe I make the picture really small, but I still try to be visible. So here's the part number 2. Let's begin. So after explaining all of those things from the first video, I can come to my personal vision of how we're living in an illusion with 3-dimensional pixels in the divine matrix. So basically how we are living in the matrix and how I was able to see the pixels that made up that matrix, and in this case 3-dimensional pixels. It's like an interactive computer game where it can show you exactly what you need to see. Here I wrote render, so by that I mean that when we're playing a computer game, let's say GTA, and you're driving a car and you're looking to the left, then everything that you see on the left is getting rendered by the game. So you see the car next to you, the houses and whatever, but everything that is behind you, you don't see. But when you look there, it will also get rendered, so you will be able to see it. So only the things that you are looking at are being rendered to have exactly these conditions, let's say the color of the car and the height of the buildings and whatever. But all the other stuff that is outside of your view is actually there, but just existing in code, so it's not getting completely rendered, otherwise it would take too much computing power for your gaming system or your computer. So it just exists there in code, and as soon as you look at it, it will be rendered and it will be made visible. And I think similar, we are experiencing our reality actually. So in almost all of my experiences, I started to see these little cubes flying towards me in a spiral motion, and I tried to describe them first to my friends, but it seems that our language is just simply not made to describe such a complicated structure. So instead of explaining what I saw, in trying to explain in words, I started to draw it. And this theory is the description of my visions together with the images that I drew with those things that I have seen. Okay, so now I have to remove myself that you are able to see that. So every material object is reflecting light or energy waves and throwing it towards you in a spiral motion. So here I drew the spiral motion, and so some light will bounce off an object like my hand and then fly in a spiral motion towards my eye or my ears if it's making sound or whatever it is. And eventually any energy that radiates off the sun or something that is making sound or light or whatever kind of energy will emit that, and then the energy will fly towards object that can be the wall, and then it can bounce off the wall, and it can go even to another wall, and eventually it will end up into one of our sensory perceptors, like the eyes or the ears or anything that you use to perceive the world around you. And it can go in those 6 directions, like up, down, front, back, and left and right. So this creates a grid that looks like a complex animated structure of fractals that are in constant motion, and it's also our surrounding reality. So here I tried to draw it in the most simple way I could, because the energy can go in all of those directions, up, down, left, right, back, front, our 3 dimensions. And then here, in combination with the flower of life, it's basically the same grid, but here you have it in straight lines, and here you have it in curved lines, which are creating spheres in the end. But yeah, I will describe this grid much better later. So once you're able to see and understand this concept, you can go look beyond these created images that make up our everyday world and start to see pixels behind the scene that are creating these pictures. I try to make myself visible so this may be a little bit more authentic. Make myself just very small, and here, yes. So I believe that behind those pixels must be God or a creator, or actually it's also yourself, that orchestrates all the movements that are taking place in the matrix. So the true nature of this creator is hiding behind the infinite number of repeating fractals that look to me like cubes. The cubes are revealing more and more information as long as you look. So the more you look into the motion of the spiral, the more cubes are getting revealed and the more information you are going to see. But once you step back and start to observe, to see the bigger picture, you can recognize certain patterns in the matrix that look very computed to me, or it looks like I can recognize the pattern, so that's not just complete randomness or chaos. There is something behind it organizing these patterns. And to me, it's like when you're watching a movie and then all of a sudden you get so close to the screen that you're starting to see all the single pixels, or you go so far away that you realize that you're actually just watching a screen and you're not immersed in the movie anymore because you can just see the screen. And here I have this example of the eye. I mean, imagine you're watching a movie and you will see a person with an eye, and you can see the eye in very detail, but then once you start to move closer, you realize what the movie is actually made up of. It's pixels, red, green, and blue pixels that are all next to each other, and each one of them takes a different color. So eventually they make up this image of the eye, but you're not actually watching an eye, you're just watching a screen with red, green, and blue pixels. And then once you go even closer, you will see only red, green, and blue pixels. There you won't be able to recognize the eye anymore, right? And so here I just try to draw the pixels, which would be one pixel here, the red, green, and blue, or the complementary colors to that. So if you would put all of those in negative, you would see these colors here, which is the I think was cyan, magenta, and yellow. But it's just a complementary to those. It's the same, but flipped into negative. And those are the pixels that we use to make a movie, that we use in our two-dimensional screens like a TV. But in my case, the pixels are three-dimensional. So let's try to continue for that. I try to start simple with the cube that I'm seeing. So when what I see in my visions, the cube, it has round corners, but it's easier to draw it with straight ones. So here I just drew the straight lines, just like this block here. But what I actually see, it's a little bit more like that. So it doesn't have like a straight edge, it's rounded. Then if you look at the corner on the front top of the, corner right on the front top of the cube, so this one here, and to me it seems like I would be watching this corner of the cube. Every cube that I see always this corner here. So imagine this is the front of the cube here, then here that one is the back, and I'm always watching that corner, which you could see it here. And then it has many different layers. That's why I tried to draw it like this, because you see all the layers that are coming from the middle, and they're getting more and more and more, and they always end up here in the corner. Okay. So now if you turn the cube so that the corner we're looking at is pointing directly towards us, we get the shape of a hexagon. So we look at the same corner here, but then we turn the cube and it will end up to look like this. It's still the same corner here. We're still looking at the same corner as before, the front right corner, but for us now, because we changed the angle, it looks like a hexagon, and we have here like a star shape, but it's still exactly the same. Here would be the front, there would be the back, and this is the top right corner of the cube. So then if I remove all the parts except the three red lines from the corner of the cube, which I'm seeing usually the corner, then I have a shape like this, and then I connected those to make something like a triangle. But now you should be able to see that it's not just a flat triangle, it's a cube that is pointing out, coming from here. Here's the corner, and then going back there and going down there. And for me, what I see is that those corners, they will go infinitely, so they will not have an end. I can continue to look into those directions forever and ever, and they will never stop. Okay, so yes, then the result is a triangle, but you can still see that it creates the corners of a cube, what I tried to say right now. So you have here the corner, and here's the many different layers, and from the middle point out, it's sending layers outside until it reaches the end here from all the sides. I just drew it as a triangle right now, but eventually it's still the same, like those layers, it is still the same that you can see here in the cube. So from the middle there are layers sent out and they will end up here, and this triangle is eventually exactly that shape. And then you see when I take a picture of the cube, which I showed you before, but I take it exactly from the corner. So imagine this is the same cube like here, but now I took it from the corner from there, and it eventually will also make that triangle shape. The triangle is a little bit bent, so it's slightly like a circle, but now you get the idea why I drew it like this. And then just to show again that for me it doesn't have straight edges, so it's more a little bit like this one with the rounded corners. But yeah, it was hard to draw it, so there you have this image. Okay, when I'm in the altered state of consciousness, I see how 3 parts of the cube are constantly rotating inwards to the middle, or it can also be rotating outwardly. I think it's going in both directions, so it's kind of hard to say, really, but you can follow this spiral motion into all the middle of the triangle. So here I try to draw it. It's like a spiral that is going constantly until here in the middle, or here on the top in the middle, and also here. And it will go inside infinitely, and it will also go outside infinitely. But eventually it reaches here, the corner of the cube, and when it has reached that thing, then it creates like a full image, which would be this reality that I'm seeing right now. And I tried my best to try to draw that, because I mean it's really hard to draw infinity, but just trying to draw like a spiral, it kind of looked a little bit like this. So if I followed the way of how the pixels look to me from the one big cube, I followed, and I'm getting smaller cubes and smaller in a spiral motion here until the middle. Or that was another try, but that wasn't actually the best drawing. So the best thing that I came up so far, I would say, is this. And after experimenting for a long time, I came up with this step ladder triangle. Each side will go smaller and smaller down to infinity, which of course I can't draw, but here you can see pretty well. So there's a layer of the cube here, and then there's the next layer here, and the next layer, and the next layer, and each layer will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it will go down forever. So if I am experiencing those and I'm actually seeing them, I can go here and I can continue to watch, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and they never stop. But of course I can draw that, so I had to make it here is the last one. But eventually, imagine that it would never stop, and that will go into that direction down forever, and then from here going back forever, and then from the top here going to the left, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller infinitely. Okay, then I colored them in the way how I saw the pixels, and it seemed to me to be the same concept as we have on the computer screen, only it's a 3-dimensional pixel. So usually what you saw before here, there was the pixel with the red, green and blue and a flat shape. So here you have the same thing, but in a 3-dimensional shape. So it's a red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, continuing infinitely down, and it will just do the same thing here to the left, and it will do the same thing here to the back. So a pixel, but 3-dimensional. Because the ladder wasn't just going down in one direction, I overlaid the first triangle that points in one direction with a second one that goes in the other direction. So here I had the first one that I show, but I had to draw it in both directions because, like I said, it's spiraling inwardly and outwardly forever. So here one is the one that's going down, and then here is the one that is going to the back. And what I did, well, then I ended up with 2 triangles, both showing the same thing but just going in different directions. I overlaid those 2 because I wanted to see what happens, because in my trip I see the thing going in both directions, so I put them inside of each other and ended up with a shape like this triangle here. And then if you look at the petals, it looks really similar to the one found in the Seed of Life pattern. So what they did, like those corners here and then the other corners there, if they put together, they will create something like a flower petal, you see here and here. And that flower petal really reminded me to that thing that when I saw the Seed of Life, it's really exactly the same thing, coming from the middle, going here, and coming from the other side there. So it is basically the same thing. And it amazed me really because I didn't expect that to happen. I was just trying to draw that cube and trying to draw the spiral in, and then eventually I ended up with something like that that reminds of the flower of life. So then I colored it because I thought maybe I understand it better if I color it. And then when I color every single field here, so it looks a little bit like this, but I couldn't do it perfectly. But I tried to continue that way of the red, green, blue, red, green, blue, going down and up and in all the directions. So eventually I had a triangle that would look like this, and that came already a little bit closer to, I think, what I saw in my trips. But it was still very far away from reality, because I think I will never be able to draw it perfectly. Maybe if I learned how to animate, eventually I can get still closer, but I guess it's impossible because yeah, I don't think I will have it perfect, but here I am. So then I play around with this triangle, trying to make different shapes, and I came up with this interesting shape when I tried to make a Merkaba out of those separate triangles. So here's one, and then I put 6 of them together, and you can see how here it would technically spiral into the middle on forever. And you have here also little flower of life patterns going around, and then in the Merkaba you have bigger ones. And then I made the same thing, just bigger. So I continued with triangles, putting them on every corner here, and made the next bigger shape. And then what I ended up was with those circles that are here everywhere, connected like in the hexagonal shape, or the same like with the seed of life. So you have one circle in the middle, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the outside, so 7, which is exactly the same like in the seed of life. But actually it would be 8, because if you see it 3-dimensional, there would be one behind the one exactly in the middle, so you would have a cube. So I continued, I did the same thing, I made it bigger, and I made this 64 star tetrahedron, and now you can see really all the cubes. It reminds a little bit of the bee nest, so all those hexagonal patterns, it's basically exactly the same. And I think the bee nest looks like that because the whole reality is made out of hexagons, or spheres, but in a hexagonal shape. So these circles, you can see, are fractaling down to infinity. So if I would be able to draw that triangle going down to infinity, it will go here in the middle infinitely, or here in the middle infinitely. So here were those circles, whereas the middle of the circle, it would just go inward infinitely. And if you're watching all the circles, you will recognize the similarity to the flower of life. So you have here those circles. It's exactly the same how they are arranged. You have the circle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 circles around, 7 on the top, and there would be the 8th one in the back that you cannot see. And you can continue that pattern forever and ever and ever. I was talking about fractals, so just to understand a little bit better, I think I have to describe the Mandelbrot set. So the word fractal was invented by a mathematician called Benoit Mandelbrot, who started to look into the reality of roughness. And he developed a formula that, when displayed on a computer screen, shows this beautiful image called the Mandelbrot set. This image was entirely created by a mathematical formula, so nobody drew anything. The only thing that they did was to make a diagram going here on the x-axis and then here the y-axis. And I mean, would take a long time now to explain the formula, but basically what they came up with is that the black points is all the numbers that would count back to 0 if you insert them into the formula, and all the numbers that would count infinitely were colored in, I think here, red. So it made that structure, and this structure can be zoomed infinitely, so you can go closer and closer and closer. I mean, here it's just an image, so you can't really zoom it better. But if you have the real computer program, you can zoom infinitely as much computing power as you have. And when it's zoomed closer, it will show more and more detail and more beautiful images of mandalas and spirals. And the border from black to color will never be a straight line. So what we try to see here, that it would become eventually a straight line. If you zoom closer in the program, it is never a straight line. It will just open more and more fractals. Because the closer you go, the more roughness or mini Mandelbrot sets you will find. That's why I'm saying the study of roughness. So if you think something is very rough, then you might assume that when you go closer to the surface, it will get smoother. no, this will never get smoother. It will always become more rough, as you can see here. So then I have these images. Now I have to remove my picture. I can see the same happening for me with the pixels. So the closer I look, the more pixels it will become, and it will never stop spiraling into infinity. So it just keeps on going in. And here you have a little bit more beautiful images of this Mandelbrot set and how it will make those spiral patterns and everything. And then you have the big one in the top, and then the more front you go, you have a little one here, and the further you go, you have a little one here, and you can do that forever. So here's the video that you can understand a bit better what's happening there. So you start zooming, and you will just end up with mini Mandelbrot sets inside, and then you have those spirals, and you can zoom into any of those spirals that you see here. It will never stop. And then eventually there pops up another Mandelbrot set, same shape that you had in the beginning, and you can go on and on and on and on, and it will get more intricate, it will be more beautiful, like crazy shapes, but eventually you just come back to the same, and you can continue the same. And I mean, eventually the computer starts lagging because it has to do so much calculation, but that's just our problem of not having fast enough computers. I think if we had a really crazy supercomputer, we can zoom this forever and ever and ever, and we know that it would never stop. So yeah, here's the end of the video, and then it repeats, but that would go on forever, so this is not the end. Then I will leave more explanation about the Mandelbrot set in the sources, so if you're interested in it or you want to try this program out where you can zoom yourself, it's very beautiful to look at, then check out the sources and you can find more information about it. So then I will talk about the Merkaba, or the star tetrahedron, that I tried to describe before already a little bit, which Merkaba is this meaning of the vehicle of light, or star tetrahedron if you try to describe it in a geometrical form, because it's two tetrahedrons inside each other. So the easiest way to understand where the Merkaba is coming from is when you draw straight lines from the middle point of each sphere of the seed of life. So you just take from the seed of life, you draw from this middle point to that one, and from here to here, from here to here. And if you connect all of the outer points, you will end up with this shape of the Merkaba, or Star of David, also called like that. The same thing in the Flower of Life shape. You can do it with the Seed of Life or the Flower of Life. You can make it bigger and bigger, doesn't really matter. Okay. Trying to analyze the movements of the cubes, I started to draw along the sides of it to understand how the rotation is going. And this rotation was always in a spiral motion, from the most infinite small point coming out of the middle of the spiral. So just from here and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, just like in this image, until it became the biggest point, which fills 100% of the screen, which the screen in this case was my eye. So I could watch down there, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And once it reached that size here in the end, I just had the full image, and I was seeing the room. I could see my body, I could see the room, but everything was part of this last image that I reached in front of my eye as soon as it had 100%. And then once the pixel hit against my eye, then the image disappeared behind me, kind of, and left to make space for the next pixel that was already coming as the spiral to hit my eye again and fill up 100% of my screen, of my world. And so I was seeing how the image was flying against my eye and then reaching 100%, creating that image that I see in my average day as my world, and then it will disappear behind me and make space for the next one. So these pixels, they never stopped flying against me, and the longer I would stare into them and try to follow the spiral, the more information they would reveal, because I think eventually what you see is just information, energy. So this information can be about anything you're watching and thinking, everything that comes in front of your mental eye as well. So when you think of something, it has the same effect. So you're thinking of an image, and the image will start small from the spiral and get bigger and bigger and bigger until, bam, it hits in front of your mental eye, and then you have that image of, I don't know, whatever you thought of. But instead of watching it as an image on the screen, you can focus on just seeing the structure that it is made out of. So eventually once it has reached 100%, you would see the image. But then what I was trying to do now was not to focus on the image, like in this case the eye that I showed you, that was displayed on the screen, but I just tried to focus on the pixels that made up the image, like the red, green, and blue pixels that I would see. And then here the triangles show how it looked before, so when it was flying towards me in the spiral motion, and then the image shows how it looked 100% in size. So coming out from the small bottom in a triangular motion towards the front until it became the image that you can see with your eyes. So imagine that here it would spiral more inside. It's the same thing here, spiraling out until it's very big, or spiraling out here until it reaches 100%. You see an image, and then it makes space. It flies behind you to make space for the next information to hit in front of your eyes. So about the rotation, the way how the pixels were rotating for me, this describes the motion of the pixels that I see when I'm connecting to this grid or field of energy. And the rotation is not the pixel rotating themselves, but it's actually me spinning forward in a circular motion and seeing the pixels passing by. And that's where I first got this feeling that I had on my LSD trip, like a baby in a womb. Like I was feeling like I'm like this, like a baby, and I'm constantly spinning through a grid, through a field of energy. And when I was spinning in a spiral motion and revealing image by image by image by image to me my reality that I'm seeing. So here I put this baby, just imagine it would be constantly making saltos to the front, and the images that it sees are flying towards its eye here, but the images are actually not flying, it's just a baby that is spinning. So I think this picture was also really nice. Even the, how can you even call this, the grid here or the lines are very chaotic, and for me they are geometrical, they are making sense, they are moving in triangles, squares, like a cube, and eventually become like a spiral. Here they couldn't draw that perfectly, but still I feel like the way how I felt, this image described it very well, because the things are flying from outward towards the human, and then eventually they reach here to his stomach, or for me they were just reaching here to my third eye, and then they disappeared behind me. So it felt more, for me, like I'm inside a cube and I'm staring at the corner of a cube. I will describe that more in detail if it doesn't make sense to you right now. So the pixels are rotating in the following motion for me. I chose a random direction, but it could be any 4 of the starting directions. But for me here, I chose the middle of the cube and I went to the right. It could be also to the front, left, back, doesn't matter. But I had to choose one direction, so I chose from bottom to go to the right. So the first movement that I did, I mean, I didn't do it. I just followed the way of how I saw it, and then I tried to draw it on this cube. So the first way how it did it was to go from the bottom to the right and then up here. So you have bottom and then up here. The second movement was moving from the right back and then into the middle. So it went here to the back and then came to the middle of the back of the cube. The third movement, from the middle back, it was going up, and then it came to the top in the middle, so then it was here and made half of the motion, like you can see here. So then from the top middle, moving down to the left, so we were here in the middle, it went to the left, and then it went down, so here we are down, and then the fifth movement was from the left, moving towards the front middle, so we were here, it was coming to the front and going to the middle. And then the last movement it did was from the front middle, moving down and back to the original starting point. So here from the middle, it went down, and it connected again to the point where I started from. This was one full rotation of the cube's movement, the way how I could see how it was spinning around. And from there on, it would move onto the next cube and keep rotating until it was close enough to me to display its image and then disappear. So it would rotate until it was so big it was in front of my eye and disappear, and then the next cube behind that was doing exactly that same rotation of movement that you can see here. And I just tried to display it here a little bit better, that you can fold the cube in the same way. So you start from here and you fold it up, and then it will go left. So the same way it went here, up and then left, and then up and left and up and left. So it up and then it made basically this. And if you fold the cube, you have here 1 on the bottom, 2, 3 in the back, 4 on the top, 5 on the left, and then 6 in the front, and coming back to 1 again. So what really shocked me was to find out how this rotation looks as soon as you start to move the angle in which you're watching the cube. So before I was watching the cube kind of from sideways, like you could see here, and then what I did was to move the angle to see this cube again in this hexagonal shape, like I showed you before, that you are staring at the cube, and this is still the front, and here's the top right, but now it just looks to you like it's a hexagon made out of 6 triangles, but it's still the same cube. So you do the same rotation that I was just describing right now. You go from the bottom, you go to the right, and then to the top, and then you do the same. You go from the right, you go back and go to the left and in the middle, and then from the middle of the back you go up and you come to the front, then you're in the front in the middle of the cube. Continue with the 4th movement going to the left and down, and then from the down left you move to the front and in the middle again, so then you were here in the front and the middle, and then the last movement from the front middle going down and then connecting back again to the starting point, which was here. So when the last step has been completed and it has arrived back to its origin, I realized that this shape has been known for a very long time already, and previous civilizations have also seen and understood the same grid that I have been seeing now in my visions. And this is how I got to the shape of the Merkaba without any previous knowledge about it, because I didn't know nothing about this star tetrahedron before. I just saw this cube in my vision and I tried to follow the way of how it moves, and it ended up to move, let's see if I'm a little bit in the way, it moved exactly like that, and then if you just leave the movement and you take away the cube, you end up with that. And I think everybody knows that shape as the Star of David that Israelis have in their flag. And it can be found in many other cultures as well, so it's not just the Jews that are using it. But to me it was just proof that why would somebody put this on the flag? Because they knew about the same things that I was seeing in my trip, because it was something very deep, something that has to do with the origin of our reality, of our nature, with the origins of the universe. And it wasn't just 2-dimensional, it wasn't just a star, it has a really deep meaning because it's the way of how our nature is created. Okay, so then I go a bit to the middle here, I'm not in the way. I started to understand that this is the shape of the grid that spirit or consciousness has created for itself to be able to experience things. It's the universal shape of the matrix. And these cubes and the Merkabas can be continued infinitely bigger and smaller. So you can have here the cube, the small one, and you can make it bigger. Or you can have the Merkaba inside the cube and see how the first image is exactly the same as the second one, just in bigger. So then here you have that Merkaba, and you can have the Merkaba here in big as well, the small one, the big one, and of course you could continue the same and draw another bigger one around it or another smaller one. I didn't do it now, but you can see here you have the small cube and a big cube and a small Merkaba and a big Merkaba and a big Merkaba, and it can go down infinitely smaller and smaller or bigger and bigger. And also I realized that these cubes are building a grid while standing next to each other. So this is the grid that I showed you before already when I tried to show you a little bit of the reality that we're living in. So I think through this grid, spirit moves, and you are one of the cubes watching out into the grid, and all other conscious things are other intersection points of this grid. And this grid is what's making up whole reality, everything. Okay, so about the grid, this is everywhere around us, but normally you don't see it. So the little points of the intersection are each one perspective of reality, and the pixels are flying towards you in a spiral motion, which is probably phi, or the golden ratio, which I explained you earlier. And depending on the frequency, you can then see or hear or smell or touch or taste those things. So depending on which frequency those pixels are vibrating, or the connections between the pixels, they are making the strings and they're vibrating, and then depending on the frequency, those things are either materially tangible, so you can touch it, or maybe you hear it, or maybe you see it, or anything that manifests here in this 3-dimensional world that we can perceive with our senses, it will become to that. So if you're able to see with your third eye, like with your pineal gland, you can receive the information in its pure form and better than just with the five senses. So you would be able to see things beyond those, like maybe you're able to see radio waves or microwaves or things like ultrasonic waves, because all those wave spectrums, all those energies that are flying around you, they still exist, but with your five senses you're just not able to see or to perceive them. But if you go beyond that and you use your third eye, you should be able to see all of reality that is around you. So that includes all the things that are normally not perceivable with the five senses that we have. And then when taking psychedelics in a low dose, the first thing that you recognize is that your surrounding will start to get a little bit wavy. And that's the first time that you start to see the grid, because this grid is not a solid structure, it moves like a wave. So just like a wave in ocean or sound, the whole universe is made out of waves moving in different frequencies. And when you change your own frequency, you're able to see these waves. So you're changing your frequency and then moving like waves here in the ocean, or here water that is being manipulated by sound frequency from a speaker. So this is a speaker. It will get wavy, and then eventually your whole surrounding starts to become wavy like the ocean, and even material things that seem that they would be super solid are starting to feel very liquid and loose. And that's why the art in 60s got super wavy, because I think it is inspired by LSD and other psychedelics. And then, I mean, you see here album covers, why they were drawing it like this, because they were able to see this wavy grid. I mean, there you don't see a grid yet, but you start to see the real way of how nature actually acts, that it is in wave forms. Or here I have just this beautiful picture of a wavy pattern. So yeah, imagine that this grid isn't solid, it's moving like the ocean, like waves. It looks like there are waves overlaid on the natural environment, which I tried to find some videos where they display how it looks like when you're having a trip and the first stages of this trip. And here maybe you can see it a little bit, how this it's just a picture of a forest, but then you have some wavy structures overlaid, like here for example you see these round things, and then if you would play the video it would really move around like this. And then here I have also another video that I want to show you how it might look to you if you are able to see this grid. So everything will be super wavy, you see, like here. And I mean, this is just the first stage, because there you don't even see a grid yet, but you start to realize that your nature is maybe not as solid as it seems usually. So when you start to see the grid, here I simplified it, just like a square grid, but normally it has these hexagon shapes. And then you tune into a certain frequency, it will start to vibrate. So I try to display it like here, that then they start to vibrate down, and they start to vibrate like horizontally and vertically. And you overlay it, here again simplified, so overlaid on the grid, your whole reality starts to do this movement. So eventually, instead of seeing a straight picture like here, you would see a wavy picture like here on the right bottom. Same like basically this one. Could be straight, you could read the letters straight, but if you look it through the grid, you see it becomes super wavy. So then I have to explain me in the cube, or the way how I perceive myself in the cube when I'm starting to see the grid better. So it is as if you would be in the middle of a cube and you're watching to the corner of the cube. Let me say it from here. So here you're inside the cube and you're watching to the corner, like to the back left corner. Or if I make it in this angle where you see it in the hexagonal way, that means you're here and that you would be watching just this corner of the cube. But actually when you're inside the cube and you're watching the corner, it might look to you like this, and this can be interpreted in two different ways. So for some people, it might look like the cube is pointing outwards towards you and you're just watching from outside to a cube. And for other people, it might look like they're watching the corner of a room, so that the corner is pointing inwards and you're just looking up at the corner right now. It depends on your way of interpretation. There's two ways, but it is basically the same. Just in one point, you're watching from the top down, and you're seeing here the top flat of the cube and the two sides, and the other one you're watching from inside up, and you're seeing here the roof, and then here the two walls on the side. So from your angle you can only see three sides of the cube: X, Y, and Z, our axis of the third dimension. So from the side view we have here the X, then the Y up and down, and Z back and forth. And I tried to display it here that you would be this black cube, and all you can look at is the left, and like looking here to the left, and then looking to the back or looking down. If I change the angle again, so instead of, it's the same image but just changing the angle, we turn it a little bit, so you have this triangle shape. So here's X, here's Z, and here's Y. Then it looks like this. You are still the cube in the middle, and you can look here to the left, look to the right, and look down. Or it would be like looking left, looking front or back and down. And then they are mirrored by the opposite side. So actually you don't have just left is mirroring right. You have up, which is mirrored by down, and you have the front, which is mirrored by the back. So those axes will become here Y, up, down, X is left, right, and Z is front, back. So when you're in the cube you can watch in actually 6 different directions. So here, well, this and this is the same, just here you have the red arrow. So you have front and back, then you have left and right, and you have up and down. And I did the same picture again, but just changing the angle again, like before. So here Y is up, down, Z is back, forth, and X is left, right. And you're in the cube, and then all your possibilities to watch. If you watch left, the mirror is right. If you watch front, the mirror is back. If you watch up, the mirror is down. If I display this in the same way with the cubes like I did here, then it starts to look like this. So you can see already how the grid is being formed. And then it's the same thing here, that you can look up and there's a cube over you. You can look down, there's a cube under you. In front of you there's one, behind you is one, left to you is one, and on the right there's one. So these are the same pictures, just changing angle. You are one of these cubes sitting next to an infinite number of other cubes, and together you create the grid of consciousness that we're living in, and this is also the 3D space-time that we are existing in. Here I try to display it a little bit. So here you are the cube in the middle with the axis, with the up, down, left, right, back, and front. And then I try to place this cube in the next bigger cube. So imagine you have this one inside here. Now you have one here on the bottom. And then out of the small cube, if you take 3 of them next to each other, you have the big one, which I have to remove myself that you can see it. So here you can see that 3 cubes next to each other will make the big one. The same if you stack 3 cubes on top of each other, or 3 cubes in the back. And then here with the axis you can do the same, because all of the cubes can look exactly in the same directions, the up and down, left, right, and back and front. So you continue it and you expand it in all the directions. So then you will end up with this here, which is basically I think 27 cubes, because you have 3 times 3, which is 9 for one side, and then 9 times 3 is 27. So this big cube here will be a total of 27 small cubes standing next to each other. And of course, I mean, this will go out infinitely. I just made it now a little bit bigger so you can understand how we as beings create this space and time that we're in, that we are living in, because we are all existing consciousnesses, each one cube standing next to another cube. Okay, so let me continue. Then put myself again in the middle. Here you have one black cube that is surrounded by 26 red cubes. So the black cube here in the middle, now it's only in the angle that you see it in the hexagonal shape, but you can basically imagine over this black cube there's a red cube, under it there's a red cube, in front and on the right. And then also I filled it out so that all the spaces here, there's 3 times 3 cubes here and 3 times 3 cubes here. So the only one that is black is the one in the middle, and the other ones are all red, which it's in total a number of 27 cubes. Here again just surrounded by black because it will altogether make a big cube again, and you're this piece inside. So if you pay attention how it's a cube while in the same time it's creating a Merkaba from this angle. So you have the cube, but then you can also see how all the sides of the cube, if you cut them like a plus sign on each side of every cube, you will have the shape of a Merkaba. And I would say that you are the cube itself, but you're also the Merkaba, and you're an Merkaba in an infinite grid of Merkabas. So, I mean, it depends what you want to call it. It can be seen as an infinite grid of cubes, or it can be seen as a grid of Merkabas, because it is both. It's just this hexagonal shape repeating infinitely into all directions. And then when people talk about quantum entanglement, I would say that grid is the carrier over which the particles are communicating. It's also called the ether, but it's basically when you want to communicate with another conscious being, instead of doing it over the three-dimensional world, which would be using your five senses, like you can speak and the other person can hear it, or you can make a symbol, a sign, and the other person can see it. But you can also go within, and then you connect with that other conscious being through that grid, and you can communicate actually way better than you can do it over your five senses, which maybe you can call it telepathy. Okay. So when you overlay one of these cubes with the other one, you're creating a Merkaba. It's just like you're looking through the grid and are seeing always a tetrahedron pointing up and one tetrahedron pointing down. So imagine you're in the cube and you're watching to the corner of the cube. So like it's as if you're watching to the top corner of your room. And then because it's see-through, you will behind that see the next cube that is touching the corner of your cube, which might look like this. And so you're looking through and you start to end up to see that shape. But this is just your cube here and then the next cube touching it behind it. And then if you keep looking straight, those cubes are getting smaller and smaller and smaller because they're getting further away. But eventually it's just an infinite number of cubes touching their corner points each other, and you are watching just a straight line through it. And when you start to watching that straight line, you will eventually see a shape like this. So you have here one cube, and then you have the same shape again inside. So it's basically a Merkaba in a Merkaba. And I would say because they can be either laid like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, it goes in different angles. So I just doubled it, and it's one Merkaba that is straight and the other Merkaba that is sideways, which is this one and this one together will create a shape like that. And then what I'm seeing when I'm in my experience, I basically feel like I'm spinning through this grid, and I'm constantly keep looking on to the corner of the cube, and it will eventually look like this. And it just keeps on repeating. Also, I don't know if you maybe see, like I see a circle here in the middle sometimes, but actually all this painting is just made with straight lines, so you can understand a bit how I am trying to tell that it's all round, because it might look round when you look in the distance, but if you look from up close, it's actually just all straight lines. It's a Merkaba. Okay. So then here you have the depiction of Drunvalo, of how the Merkaba looks. Here it's from the top view, and it's apparently different for men and women. So if you're a man, that means that the top triangle would have the pointing part to the front of you, and if you're a woman, it would be the bottom triangle, that one is pointing down, that would have the pointing part to the front. And then the other one, like for men, it would be the one that is pointing down, has a flat shape in the front, and for women, it's the one here that is pointing up, that has the flat shape from the top, like this. So that's how Drunvalo depicted it. But for me, actually, I see it more like an eye, like one eye inside the Merkaba, and that creates everything around you, including your body. So your body is not physical. The only thing that is seeing is this piece of consciousness, an eye or something, and that creates everything that you perceive, including your body, through projecting light onto itself. Okay, let me keep going. So yeah, then we come to the layers of the Merkaba. Maybe I have to remove my picture a little bit so you can see it. So you're just one of these cubes, but when you're looking out from the cube, you can see an infinite amount of other cubes that are lining up behind yours. This is due to the many layers that are created by the grid. I have no proof for this, but I believe that the distance of those different layers is the Planck length, which in science I think it's the smallest distance so far that they could measure or come up with, and then after that all the physics breaks down. So the mathematical laws that they say our universe has, if you go smaller than that distance, they don't work anymore. And well, according to Wikipedia, the Planck length is 1.6 times 10 to the minus 35 meters, which if you just depict it in zeros, it would be this many 0.0000016 meters. So very small. And you can see the different layers in the Merkaba when you color each flat plane. So that's what I did here. You have the cube, and then inside the Merkaba I tried to color the planes. For example, the blue one you have here, which is just like a flat plane laying in the middle of the cube and touching all the sides, but right in the middle. And then you can do the same thing for the green, which would be as if it would be cutting through like this vertically and touching all the sides of it. And the same for the red one here, also laying vertically, but then in 90 degree angle to the green one, so they're like a plus, and then the blue one is cutting them in the middle. And then if you color all those flat planes and you lay them on top of each other, you will have eventually something that looks like this here or this here in the cube. Okay. This here. So then you expand them in every direction of our 3 dimensions, which is just x, y, z. So you take that red layer that you have that is cutting the cube vertically like this. Here I just try to display it better so you can understand. It's basically just a flat square sitting in the middle of the cube. And then what you do is just you set layers next to each other, going to the front and going to the back, or left and right, I mean, depending on how you see it, but they're going like this way and that way. And the distance that they are to each other, in my opinion, is probably the Planck length, because that is the frame rate, the like picture by picture by picture that our universe is displaying it to us. So you are just one of those here, and then you're looking out to the other frames that are coming here in the front, and then the frames in the back are here behind you. And I think you're just spinning through that, so actually what is here in the front is your future, and then what is here in the back is your past. Then I did the same thing for the blue one, which would be the y-axis. The same thing again, you can see it here in the Merkaba, but it's just a square sitting flat in the cube. Here I just tried to color it a bit so you can understand it a little bit better. So it's this square sitting in the middle of the cube, and then you expand this flat plane in both directions, up and down, and you are the one sitting here in the middle, and you go up, 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 and down, 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 down. And I mean, this goes infinitely, but you're spinning through it. So again, the one in front of you might be the future, and the one behind you might be the past. And then the same thing again, just for green, which would be if the red one was like this, and then the green one is like this. So you have here again the square sitting inside the cube in the middle, and then you expand it in both directions. So you expand it to the front and to the back, and then you are here exactly in the middle. You are one square, and then you have the other squares in front of you and the other squares in the back, which again depict for me the past and the future. Okay, then if you overlay all of these with each other, you will end up with the same grid that I have shown you so many times. Here it's a little bit chaotic, I mean, a bit in the way. So this thing, it's not painted very good, but if I would have managed to get those distances of the red layers and the blue layers and the green layers exactly the same, then eventually you will end up again with this hexagonal grid that I tried to show you so many times. And you're just one, like you're the point in the middle that has exactly the blue, the green, and the red square just exactly inside of the cube. So as if you would be this head and you're sitting exactly in the middle, and you have one flat plane like that, one flat plane like that, and one that is sitting horizontally. Okay, so now I can come to the dimensions and the eyes. Our general understanding portrays the dimensions as the three axes, x, y, and z, plus one dimension of time. So generally how we display it would be that we say, here you have a dot, which doesn't have any dimensions. Once you create two dots, you have a line, which would be called the first dimension. Then out of this line, you double it again, so you have 4 dots, and that will make for you a square or a triangle, whichever, but it's a flat plane, and that is the second dimension. And then you double that again, so you make a square, and then next to it another square, and when you connect them, you have a cube, which would be the third dimension. That's how usually you get it taught in school, or if you try to understand the dimensions from a non-spiritual perspective. And then if you try to do that further, you just have to double a cube, which is hard to imagine because for us in these 3 dimensions, it's basically impossible to see a 4-dimensional object. We can just see kind of the shadow of it, but if you do it mathematically, or you can try to draw it as well, then you just have a cube and another cube. And this is here the shadow of a real 4D tesseract, but it's impossible for us to display it. So if it's still, it might look like this, a big cube, and then there's a small cube inside. But if it would be moving, then it might be like this animation here, and you can see how the big cube eventually becomes a small cube, and the small cube eventually becomes the big cube, and they're spinning around each other. But it's just basically the next step from the 3rd dimension to the 4th one. And now you could technically go further and try to make that thing again and double it and put another one to them and connect them, but everything further doesn't even really make sense to display on the 2D screen because our mind is probably not capable to even imagine how that looks, so that's why I stopped it here. Okay, I will try to give a different perspective of our system of dimensions. It's partly from Matias to Stefano and together with what I have found out in my experiences, but I leave the explanation from Matias to Stefano in the link in the sources, so there's a video to watch where he explains it really good. If you're interested, then you can go watch it. I just remove myself here so you can see me good. So 1. If universal consciousness would just be an eye, to be able to understand the geometry better, I created one image of an eye and another one where the eye is represented as a black dot. So you have here the eye and the dot, they are the same. Then the consciousness couldn't see anything because there was only void, nothingness around it. So if there's only this eye or this dot existing and nothing else, this eye cannot see anything because there's nothing to see, which then we would call 0 dimensions because it's just one unity, nothing else. So what it had to do to be able to see something was to split up itself into 2 parts to be able to see something, which is still itself, and thus it created duality, which now we know as black and white, positive, negative, feminine and masculine, yin and yang, light and darkness, or day and night. So that was the first move that it did, was going from being 1 into 2, going into the 2nd dimension. So it created, out of the one eye, it split itself up into 2, and those 2 eyes are watching each other, which you can see here, they're watching themselves. And to understand it a little bit easier, because eventually it will be more complicated when I make more eyes, so here you have just the 2 dots, which are creating a line, and these dots are now connected and watching each other. So for the next one, so now it's able to see itself, but there can't be any movement, as the 2 dots will always create a straight line and can only move along this line, which is the 1st dimension. And from the point of view of either one of these eyes, you would only see another dot. So you imagine that you are the red dot and you're watching out and you're seeing this black dot. Or here just changing the perspective, so if you watch from there, it means that you're watching to the front and then you see the red dot, and depending on how close you are or how far, the dot is just bigger and smaller. So here I try to display it a little bit. Imagine that you are the red dot, and then right in front of you you have the black dot, and that's all you can see. So all you see is just that, and it seems that there would be only one thing, but the thing that is seeing is the second dot. So you're the second dimension experiencing the first one, because now you split yourself up, but you have to take either position to watch, and then what you're watching is just one thing. So it seems to you that you're just seeing one thing, but there need to be another thing that is able to see this one thing. So it's two. Okay, now I have to remove my image. Maybe if I put myself here, I hope I don't disturb this. So to be able to move somewhere else or see something else, it had to create another angle to the two existing ones. So it created the third perspective, the third dimension, which we know as a triangle. So it was the second move, the third dimension. It split itself up into three eyes, and those three eyes are watching each other. So they're watching from this to this to this, and this eye to that eye. But they're also all still connected because they're part of this original one unity consciousness. So there I made these lines in the back because those eyes are having the same origin, and now they're watching each other from here. And then displayed, instead of eyes when I use dots, it's basically this triangle, and you can imagine you're one of these dots, in this case here the red one, and you're watching that and that one, and then you can watch from the one dot to the other one, and this will create a straight line, which is the first dimension, the flat line. So now there can be movement on a flat line, and every eye can observe the two other eyes and everything in between. So you can go from there to there and watch there, but you have also the distance from you to the other ones. The next perspective is always able to see all the previous perspectives at the same time. This is really important because the higher you go, you have to imagine if you go another step higher, in that position you are seeing all the other ones in the same time. You don't have to move around to see them, you see them all simultaneously. To be able to observe the complete flat plane all at once, it positioned itself on top of the other three to have a fourth perspective and thus create the fourth dimension, which we call tetrahedron. So the third move, the fourth dimension, you have now three eyes watching each other, and then the separation of this, the eye in the middle that is trying to watch all those three in the same time. And then displayed here, you can see how they're all watching each other, and they're watching that eye also that is in the middle. But they're still all connected because they're coming from the one unity, and they are all the same. But now they split themselves up into four. And then here displayed in dots, you have basically this tetrahedron, which is this dot. You can imagine that you're the one on top and you're watching down to the other three. And what you're seeing now is a flat plane. You can see a flat triangle, and you can go closer and further away from it. So that means that you are in the fourth dimension, but you perceive the third dimension. You just see like a flat plane, and you can see back and front. To be able to see all four perspectives at once, which means seeing all space of x, y, and z at the same time, it created another angle under them, which is the fifth dimension, or a pyramid. There's actually two ways to see that or to draw it. So you have here the first one now that I show you. It would be that you have the three eyes here and the one on the top, and then there would be now another one on the bottom. So they are all watching each other still, and you have one on top and one on the bottom. And then displayed in dots, you would have the tetrahedron, one pointing up and then the other one pointing down. So you would become that one, and you're able to see all those three plus the one that is here on the top in the same time. Or there's also the other perspective that you can draw it, the alternative, still the fourth move, the fifth dimension, that you would draw the four eyes all next to each other watching each other, and then there's a fifth one here on the top. And this eye, the one on the top, can see all of those in the same time. So then you have this pyramid shape. It looks exactly like a pyramid, and you position yourself on the top here, on the apex, and you can watch down to all those in the same time, which those would be all the three dimensions. And then now you can also see the fourth dimension that is coming from you towards there. So you're in the fifth one, and you have the possibility to see all four in the same time. Okay. Now, to be able to view the structure from all of its points, it took the form of a four-sided pyramid and moved downwards to the negative side, where it could see every point from the other side, the fifth dimension, the octahedron. So now you come to this octahedron, which is also one of the Platonic solids. It would be the 5th move and going into the 6th dimension. So you have again those 4 watching themselves, and you go 1 on the top. And now to see it also all at the same time, you had to move from the top, which could be seen as a positive, down to the bottom, which can be seen as a negative. So all those eyes are still watching each other and all still connected to each other. And if you display them in dots, it's this octahedron shape. And you can imagine that first you were here, and then you went down to see all those 4 plus this one, so those 5 all in the same time from your 6th eye that you created from the 6th angle. Now, to be able to perceive the whole octahedron all at once, it positioned itself again in the middle of the whole structure, reuniting the 2 polarities, the 6th dimension. So you are reuniting the positive and the negative, the lightness and the dark, and you do it exactly in the middle here. And well, because this drawing got super complicated, but I still wanted to show it, they're all connected and they're all watching each other. But if you see it in the point view, like with the dots, then you can just imagine it's the same as before, but now you have the one in the middle, and you become the one in the middle, and you are able to see all the 2 top ones and all the ones around you all at the same time. Like this, we set the base of the Merkaba structure. So why it's the basis of the Merkaba structure? By creating an octahedron, Spirit can then go on adding tetrahedrons to every flat surface of the octahedron to make a Merkaba structure. So you have this octahedron, you're sitting here in the middle, and then what you can do is to this flat surface here in the front, you add a tetrahedron, and you do this for all the 4 on the top and all the 4 on the bottom. So basically this structure is this here in the middle, and then you add tetrahedrons to all 4 sides on the top and all 4 sides on the bottom, and what you end up with is something that is exactly the shape of a Merkaba. Now it's just in another like angle, but if you would turn it a little bit, you have exactly this Merkaba shape. To reach the next dimension, you have to integrate all the perspectives of the whole octahedron by surrounding it in a toroidal shape, which would be the 8th dimension, the torus, or also the 8, the symbol of infinity. So it was the 7th move, going to the 8th dimension. So you were all these shapes because you saw it in the middle, but not seeing it from the middle point of view, but how you can see all of this in the same time is surrounding all of them from all the sides. So you would become actually this here as a torus, going from here through and going from here through, just like an infinite 8, and you are becoming all of them, so you are able to see all of them in the same time. So the last step before you begin again with a new cycle or another octave will be to integrate everything that is perceived in the previous step and feel it as yourself, 9th dimension or unity. So you do the 8th move, you go to the 9th dimension, and again you position yourself here in the middle. So now you have this toroidal shape surrounding you, and you can see the octahedron which you have created before, and you are all of them, but you don't see them from outside perspective, you see them again from within. So you see them as you would be all of those things, and you see them from inside of you. And that means basically that you're this red dot, and you can be able to perceive all of this around inside of yourself. And then if you continue to move to the next higher dimension, which would be the 9th move, it means just basically going back to the 1st dimension, because that means that all of this that you have created now would become again like the smallest dot that we had in the beginning, and from that smallest dot you do the other things again. You split yourself in 2 and then in 3, and you keep on splitting yourself up into smaller and smaller pieces. And this is basically just moving another octave. So if you play on the piano and you go from C, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then you start again with the A. So it's just the same dot, but another octave higher. And this can also go on infinitely, and it will always go like this notes step, the same as you would have displayed it in the piano, and then you go higher and higher, or you can go lower and lower, but it will never stop. And the 9th move, which is back to the 1st dimension, is the understanding that you are everything in existence and are the one being that has split itself up into many little pieces to be able to have an experience. And now the golden ratio. So before explaining the torus, I have to at least mention the golden ratio phi and then the Fibonacci sequence. So phi, it's 1.618, the number, and rounded to 3 decimal points, but it will go on infinitely. But it's the ratio of proportion that can be found everywhere in nature. So if you take a 1 meter long stick and you cut it at the golden mean proportion of 1 to 1.618, you will end up with 2 halves. And the bigger one, if it's 1 meter long, the stick that you cut would be 61 centimeters, like 0.618, and the smaller one would be 38 centimeters, which would be 0.382. And now the smaller one has exactly the same proportion to the bigger one as the bigger one had to the whole. Okay, so here in numbers, these together would be 1 meter, but if you divide them, if you divide 0.61 through 0.38, you will come up with the ratio of 1.618, and it's in the same proportion as, so the small one to the bigger one would be in the same proportion as the bigger one to the whole. So if you take the whole 1 meter and divide it by the bigger piece, 0.618, you again end up with this 1.618 number. Here's another example to understand it a little bit better in image. So phi exists when a line is divided into 2 parts, and the longer part A divided by the smaller part B is equal to the sum of A plus B divided by A, which both equal to 1.6. So this might sound complicated, but it's actually not if you use it in real life. Like you can measure it and then you will understand it better. So you have this stick, which I said if it would be 1 meter, and then you cut it in the golden ratio. So you have the bigger half, which is A, and the smaller half, which is B. So here if you divide A through B, which in numbers I did down here, would be dividing 0.618 through 0.382, and you do it will end up with the same proportion, 1.618, as if you would divide the whole, so A plus B, through the bigger part here, which will also come out to be 1.618, and that is what we call phi. The golden ratio is infinite and can spiral bigger and smaller forever. But in our 3D space-time, things cannot be infinite, so nature had to find a way to get as close as possible to the phi ratio, which is called the Fibonacci sequence. And Leonardo Fibonacci found out that you can also calculate it in numbers and portray it in a geometric way. So the Fibonacci sequence is a type series where each number is the sum of the 2 previous numbers, and it usually starts from 0 and then 1. So what is the Fibonacci sequence? You have it here in numbers. It starts by 0 and then you go to 1. Then what you do is you just take the previous number, add it to the other one, and you have the next one. So you have 0 plus 1, it's 1. Then 1 plus 1, it will be 2. Now you take 2 plus 1, it will be 3. Now you take 3 plus 2, or 2 plus 3, it's 5. Then you take 3 plus 5, it will equal 8, and 5 plus 8, 13. 13 plus 8 is 21. 21 plus 13 is 34. Then 21 plus 34 is 55, and so on, so on. This can also be displayed in a geometrical way by creating a square with a surface value of 1. Then adding another square with the sum of the 2 previous squares and extending its surface. So you do the 1 and you add the previous one, you add 0 plus 1, then you do 1 plus 1, you have those 2. Then you do the 1 plus 2, which will be 3. So from adding the 2 here, you end up with the 3 here. Then you again extend this one, the 3 plus 2, and you end up with 5. And add the 5 plus 3, which will be the 8. If you add the 8 plus the 5, you end up with 13, and so on and so on. And so here you can see how if you draw lines from the corners, here it's round, but you can also do it in a direct way here. So you go square, and it will create a spiral, which can be either direct or straight lines or round shape. And this spiral, if you take it as a golden ratio, it will spiral on forever and forever. But because nature cannot spiral in and out forever, because we have bodies and those bodies are not infinite, it had to find a way to get as close to this spiral, the infinite spiral of phi, and it was doing it by the Fibonacci sequence. So plants use this ratio to grow their leaves and flowers, but it can also be found in tornadoes, shells, pine cones, and even in galaxies. The Fibonacci sequence is the closest approximation that nature can do to the golden ratio. The more repetitions it does, the closer it gets to the phi number. So it wants to reach this number of phi, which is 1.61803339 and going on forever, but it cannot do it perfectly because it's here in this 3D material world, and there it cannot just do it infinitely, so it has to make itself going closer and closer and closer to the way of how the spiral moves, but it will never be probably perfect. But so how it does it is it starts with 1 and then it adds 1. Then if you divide 1 through 1, you have still 1, so the ratio is lower than the 1.6. What it does then is going to 2, so 1 plus 1, 2, and then if you divide 2 through 1, you have 2, so it's higher than the 1.618. So 1 is too low, 1 is too high. Now what it does again, it's adding the 2 and 1 to be 3, and then you divide 3 through 2, it's 1.5, so it's lower again, and then it does the same again, that it takes the 3 plus 2, which is 5, divided through 3, and you have 1.666, which is a little bit higher, and then it will go from being too high, too low, too high, too low, too high, too low, too high, too low, so that it gets even closer and closer and closer and closer to this Fibonacci sequence. And if you do this for a lot of steps, which is just continuing the same thing, the Fibonacci sequence on and on, in here after how many, I don't know, 10, 15 steps, you have already 1.618056, which is really close to the 1.618033. And the more in detail you go, so the more often you do this repetition, the closer you get to the actual golden ratio that is spread throughout all the universe. So here you have the images also, how this spiral would look in nature. Here you have a galaxy spiraling in the golden ratio. You have it in sunflowers, you have it in plants, you have it in tornadoes, in shells, or a lot of plants and flowers have it as well. But because a plant cannot spiral down to an infinite number of small leaves, it follows the Fibonacci sequence, which brings it closest to the golden ratio as possible. So what I just explained here. Now this ratio can also be found in humans, and one example is our belly button, which divides you exactly in the golden ratio. Now I measured it on myself, which I am 1.78 meters, and the height of my navel, so where my belly button is, it's 1.12 meters. So I divided those two. I took the 1.7.8 and the 1.12, and I came out with 1.596, which is a little bit lower than the golden ratio. But then what you have to do is you just measure a lot of humans, and then you take the average, and the average is really, really close to the 1.618, because now I tried with another person. So I took my girlfriend's height here, and with the 1.58 meters, and her navel, the belly button, was at the height of 0.95 meters. So I divided the 158 with the 0.95, and for her the golden ratio was a little bit higher than the actual phi, so it's 1.663. But you can see for me it was a little bit too low, for her it was a little bit too high. If you take 100 humans, eventually the number will average out, I think, really, really close. So the more people you measure, the more you will find that all of them have the average height of the belly button at 1.618 to their height, the proportion. So the same can be applied for our arms and hands and fingers. So if you take, for example, your whole arm, then your wrist, where your wrist starts, is exactly the division from the whole from the fingertips to the elbow. It will stand exactly in the ratio of 1.618 from the whole to the bigger one. And then if you do the same thing again with your fingers, or your hand, if you take your hand and then see where your fingers start, it will be again in the ratio of 1.6 to the smaller part. And you can do it with the hand like this, you can do it with the the elbow, the hand, the fingers, and then even the bones of the fingers are having the same. So here you have this measurement where it's also displaying that this would be starting with 2, then 3, 5, 8, and it keeps on going bigger. So the golden ratio is everywhere through our body and throughout nature. Okay, now the torus. So to understand better how the universe perceives itself, it is necessary to know the shape of a torus. We can find this structure spread all over the universe in the micro and the macrocosm. A torus has the shape of a donut with an infinitely small hole or point in the middle. That point is also called the singularity. The torus moves like a magnetic field of the earth and creates a blueprint for all things, including fruits, vegetables like an apple or a pumpkin. So you can see here, it's like a donut with the infinite small point in the middle. Here you have it even moving, so it will spiral always outwardly, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it comes back to its center again and then spirals again outwards. Then how you can see it in nature is here, for example, it's the same shape of an apple. If you cut it in half, it will come from the very small point in the middle where the seed of the apple grows again, and then it goes outwardly, getting bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it spirals back again to the bottom and into the smallest point. And you can see also this is the way of how they depict the magnetic shape of our Earth, how the magnetic field of our Earth is moving. So yes. Then it starts to expand itself from the middle point outwards in a spiral motion until it reaches the full size and will then spiral back around into the middle where it started. Then again the same for an orange, it does exactly the same from the side, comes from the middle, moves around and goes back into the middle again. And you can hear the top view of the orange, how it comes from this point and it goes out and it meets again on the bottom. This is also the pattern flowers and trees follow when they grow. Here you can see the spiral motion better. So here, for example, it starts from the smallest point and it starts to spiral outwardly until the biggest point, and then the same for the pine cone. It spirals outwardly and then it spirals smaller again until it's the smallest point here in the top, which, well, you cannot see right now, but it does basically this all the time, like the infinite shape, the infinite symbol, like the 8 sideways, and it comes always back in the smallest point in the middle, and then it goes outwards again. Oh, I think I'm a bit in the way. Here. Okay, these images look exactly like a mandala I drew, making many same-sized circles around one circle in the middle. So I drew one circle, and then after I just put another circles around that one in the middle here, and I ended up with this shape here, which reminded me of the look of a torus, but just from the top. And the way how it spirals from small to big is in a golden mean ratio. So this spiral that you could see here, it would be the golden ratio proportion, so 1.618, the Fibonacci sequence. It gets always bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, spirals outwardly forever, and spirals also inwardly forever. Consciousness, or God, is one being existing in a void. It was pure existence, but it didn't have anything to experience. So it started to create reality from nothingness, the singularity, and is expanding infinitely into all space, as every existence there is. These are all of us, meaning me, you, every animal, plant, every atom, planet, and every galaxy. Each one existing in their own vibrating frequency and creating their own reality. There are infinitely many realities, and the being is expanding infinitely. But there is a time when it reaches an end, even if it's not a real end, because it's infinite, and that means it shouldn't have an end. But it will have reached a moment when it has experienced every possibility that there is to experience. And then it will have reached one full circle of experiencing itself, going from the first to the 9th dimension. And then it collapses back into the singularity again to be one, which is going back to the first dimension. Here depicted as an Ouroboros, this image is found all over the world in many different cultures, and it covers the same features of a torus, a creature that is constantly eating or perceiving itself. So it will go out spiral into all the directions until it sees itself, and once it has done all the possibilities that it can reach, it will start to eat itself again. So this image also, I liked it a lot because I felt exactly like that when I was in the expanded state of consciousness. So I was spinning through this universe, this geometrical patterns, and I was feeling like if I follow them back to where they come from me, but then I'm also looking at them and constantly perceiving them. And I think that's what this snake is doing. It's sending out the universe to see it, but then what it's doing, it's constantly perceiving or eating it and being itself. So the one being, the one consciousness, split itself up and started to see itself, and now it's constantly watching itself and spinning around itself. But there's eventually only one. It is only one thing. So then after the Ouroboros shape, it started to expand again to be everything. It first becomes two, so it becomes duality, and then it keeps on expanding into more and more fragments of itself. Every little piece that vibrates in a different frequency and creates its own reality. And it keeps splitting up in the same way like a tree or a lightning. So you have here the roots of the tree or also the branches, and in the same way the lightning, it starts from one, it's the stem, like the biggest part, and eventually it splits itself up into 2 and 3 and more and more and more, and those will fragment themselves in smaller and smaller fractals, but they are all originating from the one source. Like you can see here, I just took this from when people make a contest, but it's perfect because it shows how basically you're starting from 1 and you split it yourself up into 2, and then you split yourself up in 4 and 8, and eventually that's what Spirit did, to split itself up into many, many, many little pieces. But then in one point they will all fall back to again to come smaller and smaller and smaller, and they will end up again at the 1. And this will be this torus shape that it creates. To understand better how, I came up with this image that shows the creator being an animal with one eye and many layers. Of course, this is a very bad depiction because the creator being doesn't even have a body or anything, but just to understand the concept a little bit. So now if this being starts to look down at itself or inside itself, it will encounter infinite many layers until it collapses back into the singularity, so into the one. Let me remove my image a bit. Well, it's not really important, but like this you can see it very nice, as if there would be this animal and there would be the eye on the top, and what the eye does is start to look inside, and then it will see more layers inside until it ends up here, where it realizes, I'm actually just one being. To display how it would look without the body, I came up with this shape of different layers. So imagine that you're at this point, you're this eye, and then you start to watch outwardly like this and this. And the eye in the middle stands for the singularity, and is the thing that looks through every single layer. So you see layer, there, and then you will come around and you do the same movement as a torus like this, and you come back inside of yourself. So it is our creator looking through every perspective to see itself from another angle. It looks from the middle point outward until the top, then from the top around towards the maximum size, and then back to the bottom and inside again until it reaches the one, which is the singularity. So after I created this drawing, I realized that it's exactly the same way a torus moves, and only that each layer is so small that it doesn't look like a step pyramid, but it becomes a round shape. So imagine this one, but instead of having many layers that you can see as steps, it will get bigger and bigger and bigger until the steps eventually look very round, and then you will end up with this shape, and you have the eye here in the middle, and it's watching outwardly to see all the layers that exist, and then spirals back inside until it reaches at itself. This is also the origin of the yin and yang symbol. So one aspect is inside the torus, the other on the outside of it. Seeing it from the inside, everything might seem white, and the only way to see the darkness is through the tunnel in the middle, which is the singularity. So the two black and white dots inside, the yin and yang, represent the tunnel that has the singularity or the complete oneness inside itself. That shape should rather be seen as three-dimensional than as two-dimensional, so I found here the animation of how a yin-yang could look three-dimensionally, which comes from the documentary Black Hole from Nassim Haramein. I will leave it in the sources if you're interested. It's a really nice documentary. So yeah, for many people this looks like as if it would be 2D, but now you can see how there's the 3D actually instead of it. Stop it here. So imagine you are this point here in the middle and you can spiral outwardsly, and then you go around and then eventually inwardly, and you do the same with the black and the white one, and you end up with this, the yin and yang. So now I have to explain it from inside the torus. So far we have only watched the torus from the outside, but the one being that has created everything in the universe is itself the singularity sitting in the middle of this torus. So we should also see how the torus looks from inside. Here this is the eye that is in the middle watching itself, so it spirals out and around and comes back and eventually sees itself. And if you would change our perspective into the one of the eye looking upward, it would look a little bit like this, because I mean like this here, because now from here you still see it from another perspective. But if you imagine you are this eye and you are looking up, then eventually you are here in the middle and all you see is this, just a round point spiraling out and getting bigger, but you wouldn't see the part in the back. Well, this is the one coming back again and into the middle. So it's spiraling from the middle point outwards to the most outer circle and then back inside in the opposite way. That's why we see the spiral everywhere in nature and why it has two sides. One that goes out and the other one that comes back in. So imagine here you're at this point in the middle and you follow the spiral, how it's going out in this direction or this direction. But then there needs to be also the other spiral, so you're spiraling out until you have reached the end, the most widest point of the sphere, and then you spiral back inside, which would be eventually this one that comes here and reaches back at the middle again. Or here, this one in the middle, move myself. It's the same, so you would have the red one spiraling out and then the blue one spiraling back inside again into the singularity. This movement from the inside looks just like an endless tunnel that you're flying through. So it's as if you are in the middle and you see constantly that you're just moving through this torus shape in a way of a tunnel. Maybe here displayed in this video, you can just imagine that you're this tunnel and you constantly are just flying through and you're trying to reach the other side, which the tunnel is infinite, so you eventually never reach there. But if you understand how and that you are the one that is watching, you can end up to understand that you can also go backwards and you're the same thing. So you are the singularity and you're watching out from there, but you can also watch from the other direction. So then about vortex-based math. There's a man named Marco Rodin who even has developed a mathematical system that explains how the universe flows through numbers, creating the same kind of tunnel. It's based on vortex mathematics, something that Tesla also used to work on. And I will just show a picture of how the numerology works and how it's applied in the torus, but it would require an entire video on its own to explain this, so I will leave some videos where it's explained in the sources, and if you're interested then you can watch that. But the Tesla's vortex-based numerology is basically showing if you double a number and you're using our 10-based number system, that means that there's no number higher than 9. If you go to 10, you just add the two numbers again, so 10 is 1 plus 0 and it will be 1 again. And so you do this with doubling, so you double 1 and it will be 2, you double 2 and it will be 4, you double 8 and 8 would be 16, but 16 doesn't exist, so you have to count 1 and 6, which is 7, and then you double 7 would be 14, but 14 doesn't exist there, so you count the 1 and the 4, which is 5. Then you double 5 is 10, but 10 doesn't exist, so you take 1 and 0 and you end up at 1 again. And it will do this forever and ever, spiraling around like this. Always 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. So if you do this with 3, you eventually realize that 3 and 6 are always jumping around each other. So if you double 3, you end up with 6. Then if you double the 6, you have 12, but 12 doesn't exist. 1 and 2 is 3 again. So if you double the 12, you will end up with 24, but 24 doesn't exist. It's 2 plus 4, it's 6 again. And then it always bounces between 3 and 6, 3 and 6, 3 and 6. And the 9, if you double the 9, it will always be 9 again. So 9 was placed here in the highest number as if it would be the seat of God, where God is sitting and watching out how the rest of the universe is spiraling around itself. So if you double 9, it's 18, but 18, 1 plus 8 is 9 again. And then you can go higher from 9, so 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. If you count those together, 36, 3 plus 6 is 9. 45, 4 plus 5 is 9. 54, 5 plus 4 is 9 again. And it will keep on doing the same, and it will always be 9 always. So that's why 9 has a very special meaning in this point. And if you want to understand it better, I don't know if I explained it so good right now, then yeah, watch this video that I left in the sources about the vortex-based mathematics and numerology. And then what this guy did was basically just take those numbers and place them on a torus shape that is now called the Rodin coil, and you have the numbers of 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, which are constantly spinning here around as a spiral, as I showed you before. And then you have them going in this direction, but you have them also going backwards, so it goes 5, 7, 8, 4, 2, 1, 5, 7, 8, 4, 2, 1. So it spirals in this direction and in that direction. And then you have the 3, 6, and the 9 that are in the middle. And I believe how he describes it is that is the neutral point sitting in the middle, watching the other two spiraling around itself. And somehow he found a way to create a coil that will make electricity flow much more harmonious and much more efficient than in the coils that we are using nowadays. So if you're interested in this, then watch the Rodin coil, the video that I left in the sources. Spinning body in void. Coming back to my own experience, in more and more sessions of taking different psychedelics, I started to have this feeling of spinning through these pixels like through a tunnel, kind of like the tunnel that I showed you a couple of slides before. And my first description of it was that it felt like that I'm a baby and I'm spinning through the wand. So kind of that I would have my body like this and I'm a baby in the belly of its mom, and it would be constantly spinning forward, like doing front flips. So as if I showed here, imagine this baby and then it's constantly spinning forward, doing front flips. And the pixels are constantly, while it's spinning forward, are flying towards its face, towards the eyes or towards the third eye. And it's perceiving reality like that by spinning through it. So I never really felt that I really had the body of a baby. It could have been also just my head kind of spinning forward, but it was just the thing that like I'm seeing those pixels with is constantly spinning forward, spinning to see those pixels to get revealed more and more information. And it was also funny, this image of the planet of Saturn, but just imagine that the face isn't like spinning sideways, but it's spinning like this, so always to the front as if it's doing constant front flips. But for me it wasn't exactly spinning front, but kind of sideways, like a sideway motion. So that's why I drew this cube here, where you can see that it goes through an ellipse, kind of spinning constantly like that. So what I have later learned in those experiences, that it's actually not me but my higher self experiencing nature in its true form. So it's not my body that is spinning, it is my higher self that is seeing through my body, that when you are in this realm of the pixels, that is constantly spinning through them. So you're watching the pixels unfold for you by spinning through them, and this will create the nature that you have around yourself. So all the touchable things, all the things around you, you see them because you're spinning. And I think this spin is also causing time, because if you would stop, time would stop. So you constantly are spinning through it, and by that you have the feeling, the sensation here that time is passing. But the time passing is just that you're keep spinning forward through the pixels. Okay, so I started to make a better drawing and comparisons, and now feel more drawn to the example of an eye that is inside a Merkaba. It's not a physical eye, but it perceives everything that is. So the things that we can see with the 5 senses, hearing, smelling, seeing, feeling, and so on, plus all the energy around. And it's that eye that is constantly spinning in motion like that. So Here I made the drawing of a cube with an eye inside, and now you can imagine that you're this eye and you're constantly looking from one corner to the other. So let's say you start here and then you start to spin and you're watching this corner here on the top, and then you spin around until you reach again that corner. So it can be seen as a cube, or it can also be seen as a Merkaba with an eye inside. So just the same thing, you have the corner here, so the eye is watching the corner, and then it starts to spin around itself until it reaches the same point. And that is the feeling that I have, that spin that is constantly watching pixel after pixel after pixel spinning through reality. And also later I came to the realization that actually it's not the eye that is spinning, it's not me that is spinning. The eye can be in every situation, so it can be really straight, but it is the other thing, the pixels, so everything else around me that is spinning towards my eye. So even I thought I would be moving to the front, I was still, and the other things were moving towards me, revealing me more and more and more information. Okay. Every angle that is created by the universal consciousness gets its own Merkaba attached to the bigger one that goes before it. This process can fractal down into infinity. So imagine that you have a Merkaba around you, you're this eye, and you have a Merkaba, and then on each corner of the Merkaba, you create another Merkaba structure that is attached to the bigger one. So then out of this big one here, you have 6. It would be 8, but the 2 in the middle I didn't draw because they're hard to understand. And then from that on, you made another smaller one, and from that on, you make again another smaller one here in the corner, and then from the smaller one, you create another smaller one, so it will fractal down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And every eye, every thing, that every Merkaba is its own consciousness. It's its own living being. So you could imagine that all the cells in your body technically have this Merkaba structure around themselves and are living, are perceiving life in their own way. And then you are that big Merkaba, that big eye, that has created all the smaller ones around itself to work for it. And then in the same way, we could see that Earth, for example, has also a Merkaba around itself. And we are just a tiny little Merkaba structure here of the whole Earth, helping Earth to see itself, to understand itself better. And yeah, here you have the fractals again, just to understand how even from one big one, you can zoom smaller and smaller and smaller, and it will fractal down into infinity. Okay, so the pillars, or pillars, I'm not sure how you say it exactly, but to understand better how it looks from the view of a single eye, I came up with another example. That would be that the universe can be seen as a cube with many eyes inside, and these eyes represent each one conscious being. The eyes are arranged in a cubic or Merkaba form and are all watching each other, similar to this. So universe created this structure of the grid, and then at every intersection it made an eye, or it made something to be able to perceive, some conscious being, and then each of them are able to watch the other one as well. So when you're this eye, you can see all those around. And the connection of the eyes can be represented by pillars. So see, as all of those lines would be pillars that hold the structure together. So the eye would be exactly in the middle of the pillar. So think of a pillar like this, but for simplification, it has on each side 4 arcs going off, and on the top as well as on the bottom. So it's a pillar like that, but because the structure should be going off round in 360 degrees, kind of like here, that it's round and it goes in all directions. But because it's super hard to draw, I just made the arc square, so it's a square, and then it goes off only here, left, right, back, and front, like you can see in the next picture. So you have the image here on the left, where you have those arcs exactly, and it's a square now, and it's going off here to this side, connecting to the next one, going on the right, and then going back, and then you could imagine that there would be one going outside here. Unfortunately, I didn't find a nice pillar to photograph, but imagine that there would be another arc going here off outside. So then I was editing the image a little bit. Now I have to remove myself so you can see it better. Put myself here. Okay, so then you have this structure here. So it's the same as the one before, but now you have just a connection on the bottom as well. So those pillars are linked by this arc and linked by this here, and then it would continue on that side here as well, that there would be pillars, and here as well. So now you just place an eye into the middle of every pillar, like I did in this image, so that there would be an eye here, and an eye here, and an eye here, and here, and it would keep on going forever. And well, you should just imagine that there would be pillars also going off like this here to the back. So this structure would just create this grid, exactly this grid that I'm trying to explain you. And well, I just tried to show it in a photo image, but I think drawn it's maybe a little bit easier to understand. So let me move myself again here. So this goes out infinitely and creates the grid that I have been talking about. This grid here. And the eye in the middle of the pillar rotates around itself, and the pillars are going off in each direction, connecting to another conscious eye, which is X, Y, Z. So you can imagine that you are one pillar here in the middle, and then you have the pillar going up and down, left and right, and back and front, and those lines are connecting you to another conscious eye, which you have up here and down, and so all of those dots would be consciousnesses, and the lines in between would be the pillars that connect them with each other. So I have to move myself again. So here's my try of drawing the eyes inside a cube. I drew a cube first, and then let's say you have one eye in the middle of the cube, and then the pillar, you can imagine here as a square, is going to the front, going one to the right, one in the back, and one on the left, and the same on the top. So how you can connect them with each other, you just set the cubes next to each other. So here I connected 3 cubes on the side, and then you can imagine that this eye is going off here to the front on the right, or to the back on the right, and then coming back down again to the next consciousness where there's the other eye here. So you can see how the pillars are creating the connections in between those conscious beings. And then I just did the same for 5. So I connected 3 next to each other and 3 up and down, and you will end up with the same thing. So you have the pillar going off here to the front on the left, and then the other one is connecting it back to this eye. So if you follow the pillars, you basically just move to the corner of the cube, and from the corner in a round way back again into the middle, back to the other eye. Then I connected 6 eyes to the middle eye, so they go in every direction, so it's X, Y, and Z. Then again you have this image of the 3-dimensional plus, so it's like up, down, left, right, and back and front. And then I put the eyes in the middle. So now the eyes in the middle connect to every axis and can watch into all possible directions. So you have that one that can see now exactly in the 3 dimensions that we are having, and seeing another conscious being into all those 3. When I turned the cube to look at me in the same way I have displayed earlier, the pillars that are holding the shape started to become exact circles, which then again create the structure of the seed of life. So what I did is I took this cube and I just shifted the angle a little bit to the corner, like I did before with the other images. So I used here this corner. Can you see it? Yes, you're able to see. Maybe I move myself here. So here's the corner, and then imagine you would just watch it from exactly here, watching inside the cube, and what happens is the pillars will become the shape of the seed of life, if you remember, and then the eye would be exactly in the middle of the corner of the cube here. So there would be one pillar connecting you down here to the bottom, and there would be a pillar connecting you here to the top. But it's the same image as here, it's just changing the angle to this hexagonal view. Cubes with red pillars. So here I just drew the same thing again, but I made the pillars red so you can understand it better. So this is the eye in the middle, and then there are the pillars shaped exactly in the same way as you could see here, that they're going towards you, away from you, right and left, and they're going down also in the same way. But then here they're just drawn in red, and then you change the angle, so instead of looking at the cube kind of from the front, you look at it from the corner, and then those pillars will become very roundish, and they remind of a certain structure, which you're gonna see here. So these pillars will become the shape of the seed of life. If you extend them, so those roundish structure, which connects them right now just to the end of the corner of the cube, if you complete that, eventually you will just have this seed of life shape that I showed you in the very beginning of the video, where basically this creates the grid, which then extends infinitely into all the space. Okay, I'm gonna remove myself here. Then I continue to expand this shape from the cross to a cube, the next bigger size. So here you have the cross still. And then I just added all those missing cubes to make the one the next bigger size, so that there would be 3 on every side, on every corner. So you have 3, 3, and 3. And with all the eyes inside, it eventually looks like this. But then you're gonna change the angle. So if you look at the shape from the corner again, like from this corner here on the top, you will have again the eye here in the middle, and then you have already this shape of the grid that I showed you so many times. And then at each intersection, you have one consciousness, one living being inside, represented as an eye. So if you then add the pillars around it again, it will look like this. So now it's this shape, just with all the pillars around. And then I just removed the straight line, so I removed all the cubes of the pillars, so it looks like this. And then finally you just complete the outer circles, so eventually it will become the flower of life pattern, including all the eyes or intersections that each have their own angle on reality and see everything from their own perspective. I believe that each one of these eyes is a living being and has its own consciousness. To describe this concept of the grid a little bit more clear, I took an image of a grid from internet and I drew pillars over it. So here you have the grid, like I showed you before, and then you have a red dot as an eye, and you have the lines going in the X, Y, and Z direction. So you have here going up and down as a Y, then left and right as a X, and then back and forth as a Z. Then I tried to draw the pillars. So basically just going from top to bottom, you would have the pillar here going from the middle eye up and to the front, up and to the back, up and to the left, and up and to the right. And then mirroring the same on the bottom, so one coming down here and coming front, coming down and going to the back, going left and right. So then I did the same thing for, you can still have up and down, now I did left and right. So you go from here, from the middle point, to the left in the front, to the left in the back, to the left up, and to the left down. And then mirroring the same here on the other direction. So you already know that this is also representing a pillar. So the only one that was missing now was the one I have going up and down, left and right. So I had back and forth. So you have from the middle point, one pillar going here towards you, and then up and towards you and going down, towards you going left, and towards you going right. And the same in the back as well. Hard to see, but now you have the same in the back. So then I was encasing one big cube around the eye or the red dot in the middle. So basically you have this dot that we started with, and then you have the axis. And if you encase this in a cube, then these red lines are representing that cube that is around that dot in the middle. And then I drew all the pillars again, now in white, so you can see it a bit better. So these are all the pillars that I tried to describe you before, going to the top, to the back, to the right, to the left, to the bottom and the front. And they are now encased inside of this cube. So I believe you're this little red dot and you're inside this cube. And the way how you connect to your space around you, the other dots, is through those pillars that I drew here in white lines. This concept of pillars is also displayed by many different artists. One of the best psychedelic artists is Alex Grey. His images are one of the most accurate depictions of the other realm, or people call it hyperspace, I have ever seen so far. And I will leave a link to his page in the sources, because if you're interested, he drew this picture and on many more that are really, really beautiful and depicting very good that what I'm trying to describe you as well here. So here is one of his drawings to understand my idea of the pillars. I believe that his drawing was actually just one face or maybe two, but then some person just extended it and made many to go more in the back, and it's exactly that. Here you have it as a face, but for me it's just an eye, and it doesn't really matter if it's an eye, a face, or a whole body. It's just something seeing out and is able to see into all the directions, so left, right, front, back, and then eventually up, down as well, which is almost impossible to draw. But here you could see that basically when you turn into your higher self, then you become this face and you're able to see into that hyperspace, and you will see infinitely into this direction. So you could draw that forever, never, never, never. It would never stop. Then here's also a GIF that somebody made of the same image, and then you can imagine how it's creating this grid that goes on forever and it will never stop, and you are just one of those heads sitting in the grid that is created of infinite many heads, or they could be also eyes or whatever. Let me move my image a bit. So, here. Now it makes a little more sense to me why it said that the flower of life contains the entire structure of the universe. Everything you see usually in your life is just a point of view from one eye looking along the axis until it reaches the wall of the cube that confines it. So that cube that I showed you before is just, you can watch out until there and you cannot watch further. So normally you cannot watch beyond this wall of the cube. All you're gonna see is it will be just like a mirror that will just bounce back and forth. So you're watching out to the wall of the cube and it will go, your view will bounce back to the back and out again and to the back, and eventually it will look like this, like you're watching into a mirror with another mirror, and then you're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and it will go infinitely until it goes so small that you can't see it anymore. But usually you could never see behind that wall. You can't see what's behind there, at least not with your physical eyes. So now I would also like to describe one concept called Indra's net. Image here. So for this I will just read a quote by Francis H. Cook on Hua Hien Buddhism. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So about Indra's net. Far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there is a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that is stretched out indefinitely in all directions. In accordance with the extravagant tastes of deities, the artificer has hung a single glittering jewel at the net's every node, and since the net itself is infinite in dimensions, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels glittering like stars of the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that the process of reflection goes infinite. So this was a description of Indra's net, and then you can imagine those jewels. So the net is made up of jewels or spheres, and then if you look into one of those spheres more detailed, you will realize that you see a reflection of all the other spheres inside of the one. So there comes this saying that you have the whole universe inside yourself, because if you look at yourself, you will find that you can see everything around you within you. This net is exactly the grid that I have been describing the whole talk, and it seems to be the same thing I've been seeing in my visions. It is already said in the description, a net of round jewels, balls or eyes, that are arranged like a grid, and they reflect each other in a way that every ball has all the information of every other ball that exists. It has no end and is therefore infinite. Here another depiction of the same thing. You're watching at one sphere that is connected to all the other spheres, and within the one you see the reflection of all the other ones. This has made it even more clear to me that these things I have seen are not merely hallucinations or imagination, as there have been stories about exactly that grid existing for thousands of years. And it seems that the Hindu or Buddhist culture has been able to see that very same thing I'm trying to describe you through the intense practice of yoga and meditation, which proves that it's not even necessary to rely on psychedelic drugs to be able to see it, but they can be used as a tool and are, in my eyes, like a shortcut that boosts you for a short period of time into a very high state of consciousness that allows you to see that grid. And here are some more images of it. Basically, imagine that you are one of those balls inside the grid and you're watching out through those lines to see the other ones. Here another one where you can see the net out of many jewels and they're connected with each other. And then I have a quote from Stephen Greer. Every point in space is connected with every other point in space. Information travels seemingly instantly from one point to another, smaller than the Planck distance. So, like this, you can connect yourself to all beings in the universe by going through yourself and then connecting yourself through the net with the other conscious beings. Rotation of pixels. So for me, the rotation of the pixels looks a little bit like this, that I'm here in the middle, and then the pixels are rotating in a spiral way towards me. Like you can see here, those lines, I mean, they are chaotic, but imagine that they would be spirals or Merkabahs spinning through here until they reach to the third eye, or here in this case in the middle. So I don't know, maybe they reach you some form or another, because if you are just an eye and not your physical body, it doesn't matter where they exactly reach, but they reach to you and they spiral from all directions in towards the center of yourself. Those chaotic lines that you saw before should be replaced with a spiraling Merkabah getting bigger and bigger. So here you have this image of the Merkabah. If you zoom in, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Here I try to display it in a video form, so you just keep the zoom, and then here also I made it in colors. So imagining that you're following one color and you spiral these triangles smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller infinitely, and you can watch there, and this Merkabah, it will never end, because this is the spiral that the universe is flowing through, that you are flowing through when you're watching those pixels, and it will create your reality until you die, I believe. And then it will still not stop, but I think that is the end of our Merkabah, so then we will become part of the bigger Merkabah again that creates, well, maybe this Earth or this universe, I don't know. This is the best image I could find so far on the internet, but I will work on better images when I have learned to animate, because I think it's still not perfect, but this gets really close to what it looks to me, that those pixels are spinning towards me, or they are flying towards me, and then I'm spinning through them, but I'm spinning forward, so this should curve off like a tunnel, basically. And then you have this Merkabah shape. You can see here a little bit, it's a one triangle pointing up and one triangle pointing down, creating the Merkabah shape, and you would just spin through that space forever and ever. Okay, then I have also images of other examples, so I just download them from Shutterstock. I hope they don't sue me for using this, but I won't publish it anyway big, so shouldn't be a problem. Other people that made similar animations that I think are also coming close. So here in this case, you have the triangle spinning, which I like that they had this spinning rotation, because even you don't see the Merkabah here, but you understand how it feels for me that I'm spinning through those pixels. And then here it doesn't maybe make exactly a Merkabah because it's just triangles touching to each other, but it's also one representation of it. And I think all of those are tries to show you the same thing that I'm trying to describe, but nobody can do it perfectly, because eventually I think it's impossible to make a perfect representation of it, but we're just trying to get as close as possible and trying to show you how this space could look. So then you have this one here. I like that it curves off and goes infinitely smaller and smaller, and you can see how the spiral continues here in the middle. And then there's this.
Now we've
so here
talked to Matt
they have the voice over
really
it, but
amazing,
you can ignore it. Just imagine you're spinning
but
through
he
this image of pixels, and you're going towards the center of the spiral. Okay. Everything that you see in your daily life is also created like the image on the screen that you are watching right now. It seems as if you're watching me right now giving this talk, but in reality you're just looking at a screen with many pixels, regulating their colors and brightness to create the effect of a video. So you think you see me, but no, you're actually just watching pixels. So small pixels that it looks like my body, because we made it already so good, but if you start to look closer, eventually you realize that you're just watching pixels. Similar, when you're going for a walk outside, it seems as if you're seeing a physical world in front of you. There's people, there's cars and the street, but actually it's also just a composition of billions of pixels, in this case 3-dimensional pixels, moving around your higher consciousness and creating the physical world that we think we are seeing. Similar to the concept of the Matrix, or what the Hindus call Maya, the illusion. So you can imagine here you have the reality, but actually reality is made up of many little pixels that you are usually not able to see. But once you know how to look at them, you can recognize that they are everywhere. Here an image of how it might look once you start to be able to see those pixels. So that is also something that should show how a trip looks when people are taking some strong psychedelics. And I felt like here it looks very good when you see how the pixels start to open, and then eventually you realize how your whole world is just made out of pixels that you have never seen before. Okay. For me, it looks like those pixels are flying from a far point between my eyes, so somewhere far away there, directly in front of me. It's like that here, like this image, but instead of creating 3 separate images, they're overlaid on each other. So they're flying from, let's say this point is here between my eyes, and they're flying from there towards me, whoop, right in front of my face. And they're coming from left, from right, and from the bottom, or like, I think those are depicting kind of like left and right, and the axis X and Z, and then Y is up and down. So if you combine those, you go here, and then from the bottom, then this square would be my field of viewing, all the things that I can see when I'm looking into this world. This square is the middle in the screen that we are constantly seeing. It's our reality, but the things we are seeing come in flying or curving towards a point that is somewhere where our third eye would be. So they're flying from there, and boom, they hit you here, and then you think you see, but actually you're just perceiving light that comes flying from somewhere there. And what I believe actually, that when it's flying from there, it comes from a point behind me, so I'm myself projecting those from behind me over me in a sphere, like a circular way, that they will end up here, but they are nothing else than myself projecting this light to see myself. Then we have the connection to DNA. This movement of pixels reminded me also of something that has already been scientifically proven, which is DNA. And all our life we have seen how scientists depict the image of DNA strands as a double helix pattern with a ladder going along the 2 outside lines. So this pattern looks just like a wave extending in a certain frequency. You see here exactly the 2 spirals spiraling around each other, and then you have here in the middle the ladder that they're following and where the DNA is put inside. The double helix can be compared with the 2 ways of the spiral inside a torus-like shape. So imagine you have the torus here, and then you have the one spiral that I showed you that's spiraling outside, and the other one that is spiraling inside. This structure of things is found all over the micro and the macroscopic universe. So you see here in the sunflower, it's the same way that the spiral is spinning outwardly like this, and then out like that, or in like that, and out like that. But it has exactly the same way of spiraling, the same way our DNA is spiraling as well around itself. It looks to me exactly the same as the pixels are moving towards me when I'm using my third eye. So I showed you this image before, that the pixels are coming from a far point in the distance, they're moving towards me, tuck, 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 eventually until they display one image right in front of my face, which would be that one. Then you can imagine the DNA strand the same. So it's spiraling like this around itself until you reach that one point of the DNA strand that you want to read, that information that you want to get, and you will end up with this. Because even our DNA, just as everything else, has to follow this pattern created by the divine consciousness, we are the perfect example ourselves that everything is evolving according to a certain building plan. Buddhists call it Tao, Christians call it God. It is the blueprint that every living organism is running on, and it is embedded into every self-organizing structure in the universe, including the universe itself. Self-organizing structures, with that I mean atoms, bacteria, animals, plants, mushrooms, crystals, societies, planets, solar systems, galaxies, universes, and so on, so on. So that's why it's just natural that we find a spiraling block of proteins in our system, because we are part of this spiral ourselves. And all those things that I stated here, I believe, are living conscious entities. So I wouldn't make a cut and say atoms are not alive, bacteria maybe, but they don't feel anything, animals are maybe a little bit. No, it's all alive, it's all coming from consciousness, and that's why we're all following the same rhythm, the same structure that has been created by this one creator that started to send out its own energy in the form of vibrations, and we are all following the same structure of the spiral. So yeah, all of these things are alive. Now I think I'm finished with the part 2. Then I'm just gonna show you some fun facts and make my conclusion in part 3. So thank you so much for listening to that. I hope you didn't fall asleep. And I see you in part 3. Ciao, ciao.